I never imagined I'd have to remind my own child whose signature was on the mortgage papers. But there I was, 58 years old with a fractured hip, watching my son and his wife redesign my bedroom into their nursery while they explained why I should be grateful for the senior living facility they'd picked out for me. Life has a cruel way of showing you who people really are when your usefulness runs out. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Patricia Miller, though everyone has called me Patty since I was a girl. I've lived in the same brick colonial in Mapleton, Pennsylvania for nearly 30 years now. It's not fancy by today's standards. The kitchen cabinets have seen better days, and the back deck needs refinishing, but it's mine. At least, that's what I always thought. I grew up just outside Pittsburgh, the daughter of a steel worker and a seamstress. My parents taught me two things that shaped my entire life. Hard work is the only reliable currency in this world, and family always comes first. Those lessons became the foundation of everything I did, especially after I became a mother. I met Richard during my second year working as an administrative assistant at Westbrook Manufacturing. He was an engineer, brilliant with numbers, but charmingly awkward in conversation. We married 6 months after our first date, and our son Andrew arrived exactly 2 years later. Those first years were like a dream. Richard advancing in his career, me raising Andrew and working part-time to help with expenses. We saved every penny for a down payment on our house in Mapleton, choosing the neighborhood specifically for its excellent school district. When Andrew was 7, Richard started experiencing headaches. Migraines, we thought at first. By the time doctors discovered the brain tumor, it had already spread too far. 8 months after his diagnosis, I became a widow at 36 with a confused 8-year-old boy who couldn't understand why his father wasn't coming home. The life insurance barely covered the funeral expenses and remaining medical bills. Suddenly, I was solely responsible for a mortgage, property taxes, utilities, and raising a child who needed extra support to process his grief. I had no college degree, just my high school diploma and administrative experience. But giving up wasn't an option, not with Andrew depending on me. I took on a full-time position at Westbrook, working from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. Then I added weekend shifts at Rosen's department store and evening bookkeeping for 3 local businesses. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Most nights I'd collapse into bed around midnight, only to be up again at 5 to prepare Andrew's lunch, iron his clothes, and review his homework before heading to my own job. "Mom, why do you work so much?" Andrew asked me once, his small face serious as I rushed around the kitchen on a Sunday morning, preparing meals for the week ahead. "Because I want you to have everything you need, sweetheart," I told him, pausing to kiss the top of his head. "And someday, when you're all grown up, maybe I can rest a little." "When I grow up, I'll take care of you," he promised, with the earnest conviction only a child can muster. "You won't have to work anymore. I'll buy you a big house." I smiled at his sweet declaration, though I never expected him to fulfill it. I wasn't raising him to be my retirement plan. I was raising him to be a good man who could build his own life. Still, the memory of that promise warmed me during particularly exhausting shifts. As Andrew entered his teenage years, the expenses only multiplied. Growth spurts meant new clothes every few months. His involvement in baseball and debate club added activity fees, uniforms, and travel costs. When his guidance counselor mentioned he showed promise in advanced mathematics, I found the money for a tutor to help him excel further, knowing it might lead to scholarship opportunities. Those high school years blurred together in an endless cycle of work, chores, parent-teacher conferences, and falling asleep with bills spread across the kitchen table. I missed countless moments other parents got to enjoy: school assemblies, baseball games, even his debate team's state championship. but I reasoned that my absence was the price of giving him a stable home and opportunities for the future. Andrew graduated valedictorian of his class. As I watched him deliver his speech in his crisp blue gown, pride swelled within me like a physical force. He'd earned an academic scholarship to Northeastern University in Boston. Not a full ride, but enough to make it possible with student loans and my continued support. "You did it, baby," I whispered, hugging him after the ceremony. "I'm so proud of you." "No, Mom," he corrected me, his voice thick with emotion. "We did it. I wouldn't be here without you." Those words sustained me through the next 4 years of sending care packages I could barely afford, working overtime to help with his textbooks, and learning to navigate an empty house that echoed with his absence. I took on a small home equity loan when his laptop died before finals, and maxed out my only credit card when his off-campus apartment required first and last month's rent plus security deposit. Each sacrifice seemed worthwhile when I saw his grades or heard the excitement in his voice about internship opportunities. Andrew graduated with honors in business administration, and I beamed from the audience, ignoring the pinch of my too tight shoes, the only pair I owned nice enough for such an occasion. I'd taken unpaid leave to attend, which meant an even tighter budget for the next few months, but nothing would have kept me from that moment. "I've been offered a position at Harrington Financial in Philadelphia," he told me over dinner that evening. "Entry level, but the growth potential is incredible." "Philadelphia," I echoed, calculating the 3-hour drive from Mapleton. "That's wonderful, honey. I always knew you'd do great things." "The salary is better than I expected for a first job," he continued, eyes bright with excitement. "I'll finally be able to help you out, Mom. Maybe you can cut back on those weekend hours." I waved away his concern. "Don't worry about me. Focus on building your career and paying down those student loans." In truth, I'd been hoping he might find something closer to home. The house felt so empty without him. But parents don't raise children to fulfill their own needs. We raise them to follow their dreams, even when those dreams take them away from us. Andrew thrived in Philadelphia. Each time we spoke, he had news about a project he was leading or praise from his supervisors. I listened proudly, even as I heated up another microwave dinner for one or tackled weekend home repairs myself to save on service calls. The hot water heater broke that winter, and I put it on a credit card, telling myself Andrew's success was worth every penny of interest. 2 years into his career, Andrew called with excitement bubbling in his voice. "Mom, I've met someone. Her name is Vanessa, and she's incredible. Smart, ambitious, beautiful. She works in marketing at Harrington, I think. I think she might be the one." Happiness and a strange melancholy tangled in my chest. "Tell me everything about her," I said, settling into my worn armchair, ready to share his joy. Over the following months, Vanessa became a regular topic in our conversations. She'd graduated from Penn State, came from a family of accomplished professionals in the Philadelphia suburbs, and had career aspirations that matched Andrew's ambition. When he brought her to Mapleton for Thanksgiving, I spent days preparing, conscious of the shabby furniture and outdated kitchen that might seem inadequate to someone from her background. Vanessa arrived wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, her dark hair styled in a sleek bob, nails perfectly manicured. Her smile seemed genuine, though her eyes cataloged every detail of my modest home. "Your house has such character, Mrs. Miller," she commented, running a finger along the laminate countertop. "It must be so comforting to live in the same place for so long." "Nearly 30 years now," I confirmed, choosing to take her words at face value. "I love this old place, even with all its quirks." "Mom bought it with Dad right before I was born," Andrew added, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "She's kept it going all by herself since he passed." "Pretty amazing, right?" Vanessa nodded, though something in her expression suggested she found it more puzzling than impressive. "Absolutely. It takes Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I took on a small home equity loan when his laptop died before finals, and maxed out my only credit card when his off-campus apartment required first and last month's rent plus security deposit. Each sacrifice seemed worthwhile when I saw his grades or heard the excitement in his voice about internship opportunities. Andrew graduated with honors in business administration, and I beamed from the audience, ignoring the pinch of my too tight shoes, the only pair I owned nice enough for such an occasion. I'd taken unpaid leave to attend, which meant an even tighter budget for the next few months, but nothing would have kept me from that moment. "I've been offered a position at Harrington Financial in Philadelphia," he told me over dinner that evening. "Entry level, but the growth potential is incredible." "Philadelphia," I echoed, calculating the 3-hour drive from Mapleton. "That's wonderful, honey. I always knew you'd do great things." "The salary is better than I expected for a first job," he continued, eyes bright with excitement. "I'll finally be able to help you out, Mom. Maybe you can cut back on those weekend hours." I waved away his concern. "Don't worry about me. Focus on building your career and paying down those student loans." In truth, I'd been hoping he might find something closer to home. The house felt so empty without him, but parents don't raise children to fulfill their own needs. We raise them to follow their dreams, even when those dreams take them away from us. Andrew thrived in Philadelphia. Each time we spoke, he had news about a project he was leading or praise from his supervisors. I listened proudly, even as I heated up another microwave dinner for one, or tackled weekend home repairs myself to save on service calls. The hot water heater broke that winter, and I put it on a credit card, telling myself Andrew's success was worth every penny of interest. 2 years into his career, Andrew called with excitement bubbling in his voice. "Mom, I've met someone. Her name is Vanessa, and she's incredible. Smart, ambitious, beautiful. She works in marketing at Harrington, I think. I think she might be the one." Happiness and a strange melancholy tangled in my chest. "Tell me everything about her," I said, settling into my worn armchair, ready to share his joy. Following months, Vanessa became a regular topic in our conversations. She'd graduated from Penn State, came from a family of accomplished professionals in the Philadelphia suburbs, and had career aspirations that matched Andrew's ambition. When he brought her to Mapleton for Thanksgiving, I spent days preparing, conscious of the shabby furniture and outdated kitchen that might seem inadequate to someone from her background. Vanessa arrived wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. Her dark hair styled in a sleek bob, nails perfectly manicured. Her smile seemed genuine, though her eyes cataloged every detail of my modest home. "Your house has such character, Mrs. Miller," she commented, running a finger along the laminate countertop. "It must be so comforting to live in the same place for so long." "Nearly 30 years now," I confirmed, choosing to take her words at face value. "I love this old place, even with all its quirks." "Mom bought it with Dad right before I was born," Andrew added, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "She's kept it going all by herself since he passed. Pretty amazing, right?" Vanessa nodded, though something in her expression suggested she found it more puzzling than impressive. "Absolutely. It takes dedication to maintain an older home." Throughout the weekend, I noticed how Vanessa subtly directed the conversation, how Andrew deferred to her preferences, how quickly he jumped to assist her with the smallest request. Love was clearly blinding him to the relationship's imbalance, but it wasn't my place to point it out. He was a grown man making his own choices. The engagement announcement came 6 months later, followed by wedding planning that quickly spiraled beyond anything I had imagined. Vanessa's parents hosted an engagement party at their country club, where I felt hopelessly out of place in my department store dress, among women draped in designer labels. The wedding venue alone cost more than a year of my mortgage payments. Mom, Vanessa, and I want to contribute to your travel expenses for the wedding events, Andrew told me over the phone, his voice gentle but firm. My cheeks burned with embarrassment. That's not necessary. I've been saving. Please let us do this, he insisted. You've given up so much for me over the years. Let me take care of some things now. I relented, swallowing my pride. Money helped with the appropriate attire for multiple pre-wedding events and the hotel stays in Philadelphia. Even so, I took on extra bookkeeping clients to cover the wedding gift. A check more generous than I could truly afford, but reflective of what I thought appropriate for my only child's wedding. The ceremony was elegant, the reception lavish. I sat at the family table beside Vanessa's parents, her father a cardiologist, her mother a former corporate attorney, feeling like an imposter in my carefully selected blue silk dress. When it came time for speeches, I spoke from the heart about Andrew's kind nature, his perseverance, and my hopes for their happiness. Later, Vanessa's father gave a polished speech that drew appreciative laughter and culminated in the announcement of their wedding gift, a substantial contribution toward a down payment on a home in Philadelphia's prestigious Society Hill neighborhood. As I applauded with everyone else, a small voice inside me whispered that I should have done more, given more, been more for my son. I silenced it with another sip of champagne. The newlyweds settled into Philadelphia life, and our phone calls became less frequent. Andrew was busy establishing himself at work, and Vanessa had apparently taken on a home renovation project that consumed their weekends. I sent care packages occasionally, homemade cookies, a knitted throw for their new couch, and received polite thank you texts in return. I continued my routine in Mapleton, working full-time at Westbrook and taking on whatever additional jobs I could find. The house was showing its age, with plumbing issues and an HVAC system well past its prime, but I managed the repairs piecemeal as my budget allowed. My retirement savings existed mainly on paper, undermined by a series of financial emergencies over the years. Still, I had my health, my home, and the satisfaction of knowing I'd raised a successful son who was building a good life. Then came the call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening in October, just as I was settling, down with a cup of tea after a long day. Andrew's name lit up my phone screen, bringing an immediate smile to my face. "Mom?" he began, his voice tense in a way I hadn't heard before. "Vanessa and I need to talk to you about something important." My mind immediately jumped to health concerns or marital problems. "What's wrong, honey? Are you both okay?" "We're fine," he assured me quickly. "Actually, we have some good news and, well, a proposal for you." I heard muffled voices, then Vanessa came on the line. "Hi, Patty. We wanted you to be the first to know. We're expecting. The baby is due in May." Joy burst through me like a physical force, a grandchild. After years of wondering if Andrew would want children, this news felt like a precious gift. "Oh my goodness. Congratulations to both of you. I'm so happy for you." "Thanks, Mom," Andrew said, taking back the phone. "We're really excited, but it's also made us realize we need to make some changes." "Of course," I said, already mentally calculating what I could contribute to the baby's needs. Perhaps I could find affordable fabric to make a quilt, or check secondhand shops for a rocking chair. "The thing is," he continued, hesitation evident in his voice, "the condo we bought is really too small for a family. We've been looking at houses, but with Philadelphia real estate prices and Vanessa planning to take extended maternity leave, it's just not feasible right now." "I understand," I said, though I wasn't sure where this was heading. "Real estate? In cities is challenging." Vanessa's voice came through again, clearer this time as if she'd moved closer to the phone. "We've been discussing options, and we think we've found a solution that could benefit everyone." Andrew cleared his throat. "Mom, we'd like to move to Mapleton." My heart leapt. My son, coming home? and bringing my grandchild? It seemed too wonderful to believe. That would be amazing. I could help with the baby, and housing costs are certainly more reasonable here. Actually, Vanessa interjected, we've been thinking about your house specifically. A pause lengthened between us as I processed her words. My house? It's got 4 bedrooms, Andrew explained quickly. Way more space than you need as one person. And with the baby coming, it would be perfect for us to have that extra room for a nursery, a home office. We know you're still working full time, Vanessa added, her tone businesslike. And maintaining that big house alone must be exhausting at your age. We thought this could be a perfect arrangement. You wouldn't have to worry about home repairs anymore, and we'd have the space we need for our growing family. I sat down heavily, the implications of their proposal sinking in. They wanted my house, the home I'd maintained alone for decades, the place filled with memories of raising my son, the security I'd sacrificed everything to preserve. You want to move into my house? I clarified, keeping my voice neutral. Move in together, Andrew corrected gently. We'd handle the utilities, groceries, lawn care, all of that. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing, and you'd get to be right there as your grandchild grows up. The offer sounded reasonable on the surface, practicality dressed up as consideration for my needs. Yet something about it felt off, like a beautifully wrapped package with an uncertain content. That's quite a proposal, I said carefully. When were you thinking of making this move? As soon as possible, Vanessa replied. I'd like to be settled before the 3rd trimester. My doctor says minimizing stress is crucial during pregnancy. That gave them roughly 3 months. I looked around my living room, at the worn but comfortable furniture, the photos lining the mantel, the Afghans I'd crocheted over winters alone. This was my sanctuary, arranged exactly as I wanted it. The thought of surrendering control of this space created a knot of anxiety in my chest. I'd need some time to think about this, I said finally. It's a big change to consider. Andrew's sigh was audible. Mom, we really need to make a decision soon. Vanessa's already given notice at her job, and we need to list our condo. The pressure felt sudden and overwhelming. You already gave notice? Before talking to me? We assumed you'd be thrilled, Vanessa said, a note of impatience creeping into her voice. Most grandmothers would be overjoyed to have family move in and take over the burden of home maintenance. Most grandmothers. The phrase stung, implying I was somehow deficient for hesitating, and take over, not help with, spoke volumes about how they viewed this arrangement. Let me sleep on it, I managed, my mind racing with questions and concerns. We can talk again tomorrow. After we hung up, I sat motionless in my armchair, trying to sort through my jumbled emotions. Of course I wanted to be close to my grandchild. Of course I wanted to help Andrew and Vanessa. But something about their approach left me uneasy. The assumptions, the pressure, the way they'd made decisions before consulting me. That night, I barely slept. By morning, I'd made my decision. If sharing my home meant being part of my grandchild's daily life, I would make it work. We would need clear boundaries and expectations, but surely we could navigate those conversations as adults. Family comes first. Wasn't that what I'd always believed? When I called Andrew back, I could hear the relief in his voice when I agreed to their proposal. You won't regret this, Mom. It's going to be great for all of us. I think we should discuss some logistics, I began, wanting to establish expectations from the start. About shared spaces, privacy, financial contributions. Absolutely, he interrupted. We can figure all that out once we're there. Vanessa's already coordinating with a moving company. We should be able to move in 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks? Not the gradual transition I'd envisioned. That's very soon. We need to list our condo while the market is favorable, he explained. Don't worry about preparing the house. We can handle everything once we arrive. After we hung up, I stood in my bedroom doorway, surveying the space I'd occupied for nearly 3 decades. My sanctuary would soon become a shared domain. For my grandchild, I reminded myself. For family. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. I consolidated my belongings, moving most of my clothes and personal items to the smallest bedroom on the 2nd floor. I deep cleaned every room, wanting the house to be perfect when they arrived. I even used some of my savings to replace the living room curtains and buy new towels for the bathrooms. When moving day arrived, I stood on the front porch watching a large truck pull up to the curb. Andrew emerged from their SUV first, rushing over to embrace me. "Mom, thank you for this," he said, squeezing my shoulders. "You have no idea what a relief it is." Vanessa followed more slowly, one hand resting on her still flat stomach. "The house looks quaint," she commented, surveying the exterior. "We'll need to update that landscaping before the baby comes. Those bushes are completely overgrown." I bit back a defensive response. The rhododendrons I'd planted with Richard 30 years ago were admittedly mature, but they flowered beautifully each spring. Still, this was no time for minor disagreements. "I'm open to changes," I said instead. "Let's focus on getting you both settled in first." The movers began unloading furniture. I'd never seen sleek modern pieces that looked nothing like my traditional decor. Box after box entered the house, many labeled for rooms I still thought of as mine. As I helped direct traffic, I overheard Vanessa on her phone. "Yes, Mom, we've arrived." "No, it's about what I expected. Very dated, but we'll renovate as soon as we're settled." Of course, the primary bedroom needs a complete overhaul. It's straight out of 1990. "No, she's moved to one of the smaller rooms already." "Don't worry, we'll make it work." A chill ran through me at her words, but I forced a smile when she noticed me listening. This transition would require patience and adjustment on everyone's part. Growing pains were to be expected. By nightfall, my home had transformed. Their furniture dominated the living room, my familiar pieces relegated to the basement or squeezed into corners. The kitchen counters overflowed with gadgets I didn't recognize, and the refrigerator had been emptied and restocked with foods labeled organic and non-GMO. As I prepared for bed in my new, smaller room, exhaustion settled over me like a heavy blanket. Change was always difficult, I reminded myself. We would find our rhythm eventually. As I drifted off to sleep, I held tight to the image of a baby in my arms, the grandchild who would make all these adjustments worthwhile. I couldn't have imagined then how quickly things would unravel, or that within 6 months, I would find myself defending my right to remain in the very home I had sacrificed everything to keep. The first month of our new living arrangement passed, in a blur of adjustments and unspoken tensions. I tried to make myself scarce, rising early to have coffee before Andrew and Vanessa woke, and often retreating to my bedroom after dinner to give them space in what was now referred to as our shared home. Each day brought subtle shifts in the household dynamic, as my familiar routines were gradually replaced by their preferences. "We're thinking of repainting the dining room," Vanessa announced one evening as I washed dishes. She wasn't asking permission, merely informing me. "That burgundy is so dated. We're thinking a nice light gray would open up the space." I nodded, swallowing my instinctive protest. Richard and I had chosen that burgundy together, deliberating for weeks over paint swatches. "Gray would be nice," I managed, focusing on scrubbing a pot that was already clean. Vanessa hovered beside me, watching my technique with barely concealed disapproval. "You know, we could just use the dishwasher. That's why we had it repaired last week." "Force of habit," I replied, forcing a smile. "I've been washing dishes by hand for so long it feels strange to do it any other way." She sighed. "Well, it wastes water, and our utility bill was higher than we expected last month. Small changes add up. Our utility bill." The phrase echoed in my mind long after she'd left the kitchen. It had always been my utility bill, my responsibility. Now, because they contributed to it, they claimed ownership of not just the expense, but the decisions surrounding it. The same pattern emerged with groceries, landscaping, even the temperature settings on the thermostat. "Mom, can we talk about the TV volume after 9?" Andrew asked one evening. Vanessa needs complete quiet to sleep properly, especially now with the pregnancy hormones affecting her rest. I glanced at the clock, barely 8:30, and at the volume display showing it was already quite low. "Of course," I agreed, reaching for the remote. "I'll just finish this program with headphones." "Great, thanks." He squeezed my shoulder before heading upstairs. "We really appreciate how accommodating you've been. This transition has been much smoother than we expected." As the weeks passed, I found myself increasingly confined to my bedroom, the only space that remained fully mine. Even the kitchen, once my domain, had been reorganized according to Vanessa's system, with many of my familiar tools and ingredients relegated to back shelves or packed away entirely. When I baked cookies using my mother's recipe, Vanessa politely declined, mentioning something about refined sugar being toxic. Still, I reminded myself of the baby coming in spring, my grandchild, the next generation of our family. These accommodations were worth it for the privilege of being present for those precious early years. I began knitting a baby blanket. In secret, working on it during the quiet afternoon hours when I had the house to myself. Then came Thanksgiving, our first major holiday together under one roof. I'd always hosted a modest but heartfelt celebration, inviting a few neighbors, who had nowhere else to go. This year, I approached the planning with cautious enthusiasm. I was thinking about the Thanksgiving menu. I ventured at breakfast 3 weeks before the holiday. I could start preparing some things ahead and freeze them. My cornbread stuffing usually needs to be started early. Vanessa and Andrew exchanged glances. "Actually," Vanessa said, stirring her herbal tea, "we've already invited my parents and sister to join us. Mom's bringing most of the food. She's very particular about her Thanksgiving traditions." "I see." I set down my coffee cup carefully. I'd be happy to contribute something, maybe my cranberry relish or sweet potato casserole. Another glance between them. "Mom's handling the entire menu," Vanessa explained, her tone gentle but firm. "But we could use your help setting up the dining room. We'll need to rearrange some furniture to fit everyone comfortably." Rearrange furniture. That was my role now, moving pieces around in what had once been my own dining room to make space for someone else's traditions. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Thanksgiving Day arrived with a flurry of activity. Vanessa's mother, Caroline, swept into my kitchen with multiple coolers of partially prepared dishes, immediately commandeering the counter space and oven as if she'd been cooking there for years. Her husband, Robert, took over the living room, turning on the football game and rearranging the furniture I had just arranged that morning. "Mom, could you help Caroline with the table settings?" Andrew asked, intercepting me as I stood uncertainly in my own hallway. She brought her special holiday china. I spent the next hour following Caroline's precise instructions on napkin folding and place card arrangement, while she commented on every aspect of my home. "These light fixtures must be original to the house," she observed, glancing up at the dining room chandelier. "So retro. Have you considered updating them? Modern fixtures would really elevate the space." "I've always liked that chandelier," I replied mildly. "Richard installed it himself." "Oh, sentimental value, I understand." Her tone suggested sentiment was a quaint but impractical consideration. "Still, when you're ready to modernize, our contractor did magnificent work on our vacation home in the Poconos. I'd be happy to share his information." The meal itself was an exercise in invisibility. I sat at the far end of my own dining table, displaced from my usual seat by Vanessa's sister Emma, who dominated the conversation with stories about her recent promotion. Caroline served her traditional dishes with flourish, accepting compliments, as her due. When Andrew praised the cornbread stuffing, she beamed. Family recipe, passed down for generations. I've taught Vanessa how to make it properly. I thought of my own cornbread stuffing recipe, carefully written in my mother's hand, now sitting unused in my recipe box. Another tradition quietly set aside. After dinner, as I began clearing plates, Caroline touched my arm. "Oh, don't worry about cleanup, Patty. The youngsters will handle it. You must be tired." I wasn't tired. I was 58, not 88. But I nodded and retreated, recognizing the dismissal for what it was. From the living room, I heard their laughter, their easy conversation flowing without me. I slipped upstairs to my bedroom, where I sat on the edge of my bed, surrounded by framed photos from a life that suddenly felt very distant. December brought holiday decorations I didn't recognize. My collection of ornaments, many handmade by Andrew in elementary school, remained boxed in the attic while Vanessa arranged color-coordinated glass balls on a tree taller than any I'd ever purchased. We thought a cohesive color scheme would look more elegant, she explained when I inquired about the ornaments. But we could add a few of your special ones if you'd like. Maybe on the backside of the tree? I declined the offer, unwilling to have my memories relegated to where they wouldn't disrupt her aesthetic. Instead, I hung a single cherished ornament, a ceramic angel Richard had given me during our first Christmas together, on the small potted evergreen in my bedroom. Christmas morning, I woke early, habit still pulling me toward the kitchen to prepare cinnamon rolls as I had every Christmas of Andrew's life. But as I passed the nursery, formerly my sewing room, I heard Vanessa's voice. "Our first Christmas in our own home," she was saying, her hand resting on her slightly rounded belly. "Next year you'll be here with us, little one." Their own home. The words stopped me cold in the hallway. Despite contributing nothing to the mortgage, despite having lived there barely 3 months, they had claimed complete ownership in their minds. I was simply an occupant, tolerated but unnecessary. Still, I baked the cinnamon rolls, following the recipe I knew by heart. When Andrew came down and smelled them, his face lit up with nostalgic delight. "Mom's famous Christmas cinnamon rolls," he exclaimed, reaching for one immediately. "Van, you have to try these. They're incredible." Vanessa took a small bite and smiled politely. "Very sweet. Maybe we could try a whole grain version next year. With less sugar?" January brought bitterly cold weather and new household tensions. The furnace struggled to heat the house evenly, leading to debates about the thermostat setting. The gas bill was astronomical last month, Andrew told me, showing me the statement with highlighted figures. "We need to keep the heat at 68 maximum." I pulled my cardigan tighter. "The second floor gets much colder than down here. Could we make an exception for overnight?" He hesitated, clearly torn. "Let me talk to Vanessa. Maybe we could get you a space heater for your room." The space heater appeared the next day, small, efficient, and a clear message that my comfort was a separate consideration from the household's. That night, I huddled under extra blankets, the little heater humming beside me, and wondered how I had become a guest in my own home. February brought the first real crisis in our living arrangement. I slipped on an icy patch in the grocery store parking lot, fracturing my hip and requiring surgery. The recovery would be lengthy, 6 weeks minimum before I could resume normal activities, the doctor explained. Andrew paced the hospital room, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, we understand 6 weeks. No, we don't have anyone who can stay with her during the day. Home health visits twice a week? That seems minimal." When he ended the call, his expression was strained. "The insurance will only cover limited home health care. You'll need someone with you most of the time for the first few weeks." "I'll manage," I assured him, though the pain medication made it difficult to think clearly. "Maybe I can hire someone part-time." The crease between his eyebrows deepened. On what budget, Mom? Your medical leave only covers 60% of your salary, and there's the hospital copay to consider. I hadn't thought that far ahead. My savings had dwindled over recent years, between home repairs and helping Andrew. The reality of my financial vulnerability hit me with sudden clarity through the fog of pain medication. Let's get you home. First, Andrew sighed. We'll figure something out. Coming home to my newly rearranged bedroom was disorienting. They'd moved furniture to accommodate a rented hospital bed, shifting my dresser and nightstand to unfamiliar positions. My belongings had been rearranged or relocated entirely, with medications and essentials placed within reach, but personal items moved to make space for medical supplies. The first few days passed in a blur of pain management and basic needs. Andrew and Vanessa took turns checking on me between their work responsibilities, bringing meals and helping me to the bathroom. Their care was dutiful but harried, each task completed with an eye on the clock. I have a conference call in 20 minutes, Vanessa would say, setting down a tray with breakfast. Do you need anything else before I go downstairs? Or Andrew, I'll help you with a shower after dinner, but I need to finish this report by 9. Will that work for you? By the end of the first week, the strain was showing in all of us. My dependents chafed against my lifelong self-sufficiency. Their schedules were disrupted by my needs. The carefully constructed balance of our household had collapsed under the weight of my injury. It was a Tuesday evening during my third week of recovery when I overheard them in the hallway outside my bedroom door. I had been napping but woke to their hushed voices. This isn't sustainable, Vanessa was saying, her voice tense. I'm 5 months pregnant, working full-time, and now playing nurse every evening. Something has to give. What do you suggest? Andrew's voice was equally strained. She can't manage on her own yet. My mother mentioned Oak Ridge Assisted Living has short-term rehabilitation stays. Insurance might cover it, especially if her doctor agrees it's medically necessary. A pause. You want to send my mother to a nursing home? It's not a nursing home. It's a rehabilitation facility, Vanessa corrected, impatience edging her tone. They have professionals there, Andrew. Physical therapists, nurses, proper equipment. She'd recover more quickly with proper care. I don't know. His voice was uncertain. She's always been so independent. I'm not sure she'd agree to it. Vanessa's sigh was audible through the door. This might be the perfect opportunity to discuss the larger issue then. What larger issue? The future, Andrew. Your mother can't continue living here indefinitely. This injury proves she needs more support than we can provide, especially with the baby coming. We need to start transitioning her toward independent living. My breath caught in my throat. Independent living? I wasn't even 60. You mean after she recovers? Andrew asked slowly. I mean, we should start the conversation now, while this situation has made the need obvious. Oak Ridge has those lovely senior apartments adjacent to their main facility. Residents live independently but have access to medical care and activities. It would be perfect for her. Those places are expensive, he pointed out. Mom's retirement savings are minimal. Another pause. The house has considerable equity. If she sold it to us at a reasonable price, she could afford the senior apartment and have savings left over. We'd have our family home secured before the baby comes, and she'd have appropriate housing with support systems in place. Everyone wins. The blood rushed in my ears so loudly I almost missed Andrew's response. I don't know, Van. This is her home. She's lived here for 30 years. And she's done a wonderful job maintaining it for your family, Vanessa replied, her voice softening strategically. Now it's time for her to enjoy her retirement without the burden of home ownership. And for us to give our child the stable family home you had growing up. It's the natural progression, Andrew. Their footsteps moved away from my door, their voices fading as they descended the stairs. I lay still, stunned by what I'd overheard. They wanted me out. Not just temporarily for recovery, but permanently. They had been living in my home for barely 5 months, and already they were planning to claim it completely. Worse still was the realization that they saw me as diminished, an elderly burden rather than a capable adult facing a temporary setback. In their eyes, my age and injury had reduced me to someone who needed to be managed, placed somewhere appropriate, out of their way. That night, I couldn't sleep despite my pain medication. I reviewed mental calculations of my finances, my mortgage, my limited options. The house wasn't fully paid off. I'd refinanced 8 years ago to help Andrew with his final year of college expenses and unexpected car repairs. The monthly payment was manageable with my full-time income, but represented a significant portion of my budget. Would they even know about the mortgage? I had always handled the household finances alone, shielding Andrew from financial worries, even as an adult. He might genuinely believe the house was fully paid for, an asset I could easily liquidate rather than an ongoing financial commitment. The next morning, when Vanessa brought my breakfast tray, her smile seemed particularly calculated. "I've been thinking about your recovery," she began, adjusting my pillows with practiced efficiency. "It must be so frustrating being confined to this room." I nodded cautiously. "It's certainly an adjustment. Andrew and I have been discussing options that might help speed your healing process." She perched on the edge of the bed, her expression one of rehearsed concern. "There's an excellent rehabilitation center at Oak Ridge that specializes in rapid recovery. They have daily physical therapy, appropriate equipment, round-the-clock care." "That sounds expensive," I observed, watching her closely. She waved away my concern. "Insurance would cover most of it, especially with your doctor's recommendation. And you wouldn't have to worry about burdening us or navigating stairs before you're ready." Burdening them. In my own home. "I appreciate the thought," I said carefully, "but I prefer to recover here." Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "I understand the emotional attachment to home, but sometimes the practical choice is healthier in the long run. Oak Ridge also has these lovely independent living apartments that we thought you might want to tour while you're there for rehabilitation. Many of them have recently been renovated, much more modern than this old house, and no maintenance. Worries." There it was, the real agenda, laid bare despite her careful framing. I took a slow sip of orange juice, considering my response. "I'm committed to recovering here," I said finally, "but I appreciate your research." Vanessa's composure slipped for just a moment, frustration flashing across her features before she rearranged them into concerned disappointment. "Well, think about it. Recovery is so much faster with proper professional care." After she left, I reached for my phone and called the one person I knew would give me unfiltered advice, my former colleague and dear friend, Helen. For 30 minutes, I poured out everything: the gradual takeover of my home, my current vulnerability, and the conversation I'd overheard. "Those ungrateful little vultures," Helen exclaimed, her indignation warming me through the phone line. "Moving into your house rent-free and then trying to push you out? I always thought that girl had an agenda." "I'm not sure what to do," I admitted. "I can't exactly kick out my pregnant daughter-in-law, but I also can't let them send me off to a retirement home." "First things first," Helen said, her voice shifting into the practical tone I'd always admired during our working years together. "What's the exact status of your mortgage? How much equity do you actually have?" I pulled out my most recent statement from the nightstand drawer. "I still owe about $127,000. The house would probably sell for around $320,000 in today's market." "So there's equity, but not the windfall they're probably imagining," Helen noted. "And I'm guessing they don't know about the remaining mortgage?" "I've always handled the finances myself. Andrew might assume the house is paid off by now." Helen was quiet for a moment. "Patty, I think it's time for some strategic transparency. Not confrontational, just factual. They're making plans based on assumptions about your financial situation and your home ownership." Those assumptions need correction. Fear and uncertainty tangled in my chest. What if it damages my relationship with Andrew, with my grandchild? Honey, they're already planning to ship you off to Shady Pines. How much more damage could honesty do? Helen's voice softened. You don't have to be confrontational, just truthful about your situation and your intentions. After we hung up, I spent the afternoon gathering documents, mortgage statements, property tax bills, home insurance records, utility payments. Each piece of paper represented years of sacrifice, of solitary responsibility. Together, they told the story of what this house had cost me, what it still cost me, and who had paid those costs alone. That evening, when Andrew came to help me with dinner, I asked him to sit for a moment. You seem preoccupied, I observed as he settled into the chair beside my bed. Is everything all right? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father, it made my heart ache. Just work stress, and worry about you, of course. Vanessa mentioned Oak Ridge this morning, I said, keeping my tone neutral. She seems quite enthusiastic about their rehabilitation program. Andrew shifted uncomfortably. It's just an option to consider. The doctor mentioned you might need more intensive physical therapy than the home visits provide. And the independent living apartments she mentioned? Are those also the doctor's recommendation? His gaze dropped to his hands. We've been thinking about the future, Mom. About what makes sense for everyone. By everyone, you mean yourselves and the baby, I clarified, working to keep accusation from my voice. And you, he insisted, looking up. This house is a lot for one person to maintain. The stairs, the yard work, the ongoing repairs. It's a burden you shouldn't have to carry at your age. At my age. As if 58 were ancient. As if I hadn't been managing alone for decades already. Andrew, I said gently, I think there's been a misunderstanding about my home and my finances. What do you mean? I reached for the folder I'd prepared. When your father died, the house wasn't paid off. I've been making mortgage payments every month for the past 24 years. I handed him the most recent statement. Currently, I still owe $127,000. He stared at the paper, confusion evident in his expression. But I always thought, you were a child when your father died. There was no reason to burden you with financial details. I passed him the property tax statement next. I pay $4,200 annually in property taxes. The homeowner's insurance is another $1,400 per year. With each document I handed him, his expression grew more troubled. The utility bills, the recent furnace repair invoice, the roof replacement from 3 years ago, the concrete evidence of ongoing financial responsibility that I had carried alone. I had no idea, he finally said, voice subdued. All these years I just assumed. I wanted you to focus on school, on building your future, I explained. You didn't need to worry about household finances. He glanced through the papers again, his brow furrowed. So when Vanessa and I talked about possibly buying the house from you, there would be less equity than you might have expected. I finished for him. And the practical reality is that I need somewhere to live that I can afford on my income and eventual retirement. This house, with its manageable mortgage that will be paid off before I'm 70, is that place. Andrew was silent for a long moment, processing this new information that clearly disrupted whatever plans he and Vanessa had been formulating. We should have talked about all this before moving in, he finally said. Made clear agreements about expectations and contributions. Yes, I agreed simply. We should have. He stood, gathering the papers into a neat stack. I need to discuss this with Vanessa. Figure out what makes sense going forward. After he left, I leaned back against my pillows, emotionally drained but oddly lighter. The truth was out now, not all of it, but enough to begin an honest conversation. Whether that conversation would lead to understanding or further conflict remained to be seen. That night, I heard their voices raised in discussion downstairs. Too distant to make out words, but clear enough to recognize tension. I didn't regret my disclosure, but I worried about its impact on our already strained household. My grandchild deserved to enter a peaceful home, not one divided by property disputes and resentment. As I drifted toward sleep, I reminded myself that I had survived far worse challenges than this one. I had raised a child alone, maintained a home, built a career from limited beginnings. I would weather this storm as well, without sacrificing the security I had spent decades building. What I couldn't have anticipated was how quickly the situation would escalate, or how a simple act of financial transparency would trigger a power struggle that would force me to defend my most basic rights in my own home. The morning after I revealed the truth about my mortgage to Andrew, the atmosphere in the house was noticeably different. Vanessa brought my medication and breakfast tray without her usual stream of one-sided conversation. Her movements were stiff, her smile absent, as she adjusted my pillows with perfunctory motions. "Andrew told me about your financial situation," she finally said, standing at the foot of my bed. "I had no idea you were still making mortgage payments." I sipped my tea before responding. "It never came up in conversation. I've always handled my finances privately." "But surely you could have mentioned it when we discussed moving in," she pressed, a hint of accusation in her tone. "It changes everything about our arrangement." "How so?" I asked. "You're living here without contributing to the mortgage. My financial obligations haven't changed." Her cheeks flushed slightly. "We've been covering groceries and utilities, and Andrew fixed the leaking bathroom faucet last month." I nodded. "Those contributions are appreciated, but they don't equate to co-ownership of my home." "No one suggested co-ownership," she said quickly, though her expression suggested otherwise. "We just thought, with the baby coming, that a more permanent arrangement might benefit everyone." "A permanent arrangement where I move to Oak Ridge and you take over my house," I clarified. "That was the plan, wasn't it?" Vanessa's expression hardened. "We were trying to consider your needs as well as ours. At your age, and especially after this injury, wouldn't you prefer something more manageable? Without stairs, yard work, maintenance, concerns?" "At my age," I repeated, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "I'm 58, Vanessa, not 85, and this injury is temporary." She shifted her weight, clearly uncomfortable with the direct confrontation. "I should let you rest. The physical therapist will be here at 11. After she left, I spent the morning contemplating the reality of my situation. The revelation about the mortgage had disrupted their plans, but I doubted they had abandoned them entirely. If anything, they might now be more determined to establish control over the house before the baby arrived. I needed legal advice, not just friendly counsel from Helen, but professional guidance about my rights and obligations. Using my phone, I searched for real estate attorneys in the area, hoping to find someone who could offer a consultation over the phone given my limited mobility. By the time the physical therapist arrived, I had scheduled a call with a lawyer for the following day and begun making notes about my current living arrangement. The therapy session left me exhausted but determined. Each painful movement brought me one step closer to independence, to reclaiming my ability to stand firmly in my own home. That evening, Andrew brought my dinner tray himself, lingering after setting it down. "How was physical therapy?" he asked, his tone careful, neutral. "Challenging," I admitted, "but necessary." He nodded, then sat in the chair beside my bed. "Mom, I want to apologize. I made assumptions about your financial situation without asking. That wasn't fair." The apology surprised me, though his sincerity seemed genuine. "Thank you for saying that." "I've been thinking about our arrangement," he continued. "Vanessa and I should be contributing more, given that you're still paying the mortgage." "That would be reasonable," I agreed. "We could pay half the mortgage payment," he offered, That would help ease your financial burden while we live here. I considered his proposal. On the surface, it seemed fair, even generous. But something in his phrasing gave me pause. And how long do you anticipate this arrangement lasting? He hesitated, confirming my suspicion that there was more to this offer. Well, with the baby coming, we were hoping for some stability, maybe a more permanent situation. Meaning? Maybe we could formalize the arrangement, put it in writing that we contribute half the mortgage in exchange for certain considerations. There it was. What kind of considerations, Andrew? He shifted uncomfortably. Just clarity around shared spaces, decision-making about household matters, and eventually, well, given your age and this recent health setback, maybe we should discuss longer-term plans for the house. You mean who gets it when I die? I said flatly. Andrew winced. Mom, that's not... It is exactly what you mean, I interrupted, my patience finally fraying. You want to establish a claim on this house while I'm still very much alive and intending to live here for decades to come. That's not fair, he protested, but his flushed face told me I'd hit the mark. We're just trying to plan for our family's future. So am I replied. And my future includes living in my own home, making my own decisions, for as long as I'm able. He stood, frustration evident in his stance. You're being unreasonable. We're offering to help with the mortgage. And I appreciate that offer, I said, keeping my voice level despite my rising anger. But any financial arrangement needs to be clear about what it does and doesn't include. Your contribution doesn't buy you ownership or decision-making authority over my property. Andrew paced at the foot of my bed. So what are you saying? That we have no say in anything despite living here and contributing financially? I'm saying that boundaries need to be established, I clarified. This is still my home. I'm happy to have you here as family, not as property managers or prospective owners waiting in the wings. His expression darkened. After everything we've done to help during your recovery, which I appreciate, I interjected. But that help doesn't entitle you to my house, Andrew. He left without responding, closing my bedroom door with slightly more force than necessary. In the silence that followed, I felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness at the rift with my son, anxiety about the escalating tension, but also a growing resolve to protect what was rightfully mine. The next day, my call with the attorney, Martin Delaney, provided clarity I desperately needed. Based on what you've described, Mrs. Miller, they have no legal claim to your property, he assured me after I'd explained the situation. You've made all mortgage payments and maintenance decisions. The house is solely in your name. Their brief residency and minimal financial contributions don't establish any ownership rights. What about their offer to pay half the mortgage? I asked. Be very careful with such arrangements, he cautioned. If you accept, I'd strongly recommend a formal rental agreement that explicitly states their payments do not constitute equity or ownership interest in the property. Otherwise, they could potentially claim they were making payments toward eventual ownership. And if they refuse such an agreement, then I'd question their intentions, he said simply. A genuine desire to contribute fairly wouldn't include resistance to clarifying the terms of that contribution. After the call, I felt both reassured and troubled. The law was on my side, but enforcing those legal rights within a family relationship was complicated by emotional connections and the impending arrival of my grandchild. That afternoon, Vanessa entered my room without knocking, something she'd never done before. Her expression was tight, lips pressed into a thin line. Andrew told me about your conversation, she began, not bothering with pleasantries. I think we need to clarify a few things. I set aside the novel I'd been reading. I agree. When we moved in, we understood this would be a family home for all of us, she continued. We've invested time, energy, and money into making it comfortable for everyone. including repairing things that had been neglected for years. I raised an eyebrow at this characterization but let her continue. Now suddenly you're treating us like unwelcome house guests, she said, her voice rising slightly, after we've rearranged our entire lives to accommodate your recovery. I appreciate the help you've provided, I said calmly. But that doesn't change the fundamental reality that this is my house, purchased with my money, maintained with my resources for decades. Your house, she repeated, her tone bitter. Where does that leave us? Where does that leave your grandchild? You are welcome to live here, I clarified, but under terms that recognize and respect my ownership. She crossed her arms over her expanding belly. And what are those terms exactly? First, any financial contribution you make is rent, not a path to ownership, I stated firmly. Second, major household decisions, painting, furniture arrangement, renovations, need my approval. Third, my bedroom and personal spaces remain under my control completely. Vanessa's laugh was sharp, incredulous. So we're just tenants to you? After everything we've done? Your family, I corrected, but that doesn't mean I surrender my home or my autonomy. I need to discuss this with Andrew, she said stiffly. This isn't what we agreed to when we moved in. We never actually agreed to anything specific, I pointed out, which is part of the problem. After she left, I reached for my phone and called Helen. This confrontation had left me shaken, and I needed the steadying influence of someone firmly in my corner. You did the right thing, Helen assured me after I recounted the conversation. They were counting on your maternal instinct to override your self-protection. Classic manipulation tactic. I feel terrible, I admitted. Like I'm forcing them out when Vanessa is 6 months pregnant. You're not forcing them out, Helen countered. You're establishing boundaries in your own home. There's a world of difference. What if they do leave? What if I never get to know my grandchild? Helen's sigh was gentle but firm. Patty, listen to me. If they would deny you a relationship with your grandchild because you refuse to give them your house, what does that tell you about their character? About the kind of relationship they intended all along? Her words hit with the force of truth. This wasn't just about property. It was about respect, about whether they valued me as a person or merely as a means to material gain. The next few days passed in uncomfortable silence. Andrew and Vanessa spoke to me only when necessary, their tones polite but distant. I continued my physical therapy, gradually increasing my mobility with a walker, determined to regain my independence as quickly as possible. On Friday evening, a week after our initial confrontation, Andrew knocked on my bedroom door. His expression was solemn as he entered, carrying a folder similar to the one I had used to show him the mortgage documents. Vanessa and I have been talking, he began, sitting in the chair beside my bed, about our living situation and the future. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. We've put together a proposal, he said, opening the folder and removing several typed pages. A formal agreement about our continued residence here. I took the document, scanning the first page. It was titled Co-Living Agreement and began with an acknowledgement that I was the legal owner of the property. So far, so good. As I read further, however, the nature of their proposal became clear. They would pay half the mortgage and utilities, but in exchange, they would have equal decision-making authority regarding household management, including but not limited to decor, renovations, use of common spaces, and guest policies. Furthermore, they proposed that, in recognition of familial bonds and shared investment, I would amend my will to ensure the property transferred to Andrew upon my death, thus maintaining the family home for future generations. I looked up from the document, meeting Andrew's expectant gaze. This isn't a rental agreement, I said. This is a request for co-ownership without actually purchasing half the house. He shifted uncomfortably. We're trying to find a middle ground, Mom. One that respects your legal ownership while acknowledging our contribution and commitment to this being our family home long term. By having me promise the house to you in my will, I noted. That's not a middle ground, Andrew. That's you getting exactly what you want, guarantee of ownership while I get. What, exactly? The privilege of having you control my living environment while I'm still alive? His face flushed. That's not fair. We're offering substantial financial help. In exchange for immediate control and eventual ownership, I finished. No, thank you. So what do you propose? He asked, frustration evident in his tone. That we just keep living in limbo? I reached into my nightstand drawer and withdrew a document my attorney had emailed earlier that day. This is a standard month-to-month rental agreement. It establishes that you and Vanessa are tenants, with all the normal rights and responsibilities that entails. I've set the rent at $800 per month, well below market value for a 4-bedroom house in this neighborhood. Andrew stared at the document as if it were a snake coiled on the bed between us. A rental agreement? Like we're strangers? Like you're adults living in someone else's property, I corrected gently. It protects both parties, Andrew. You have security knowing I can't arbitrarily change the terms, and I have clarity about the nature of our arrangement. He stood abruptly. I need to show this to Vanessa. Of course, I agreed. Take your time considering it, but that's my offer, the only one I'm comfortable with. After he left, I exhaled slowly, surprised by my own steadiness. The confrontation I'd been dreading for weeks had finally happened, and I'd held my ground. Whatever came next, I had established my position clearly and fairly. 2 days later, Andrew and Vanessa asked to speak with me together. They entered my room with the solemnity of diplomats at a treaty negotiation, Vanessa lowering herself carefully into the armchair while Andrew remained standing. We've discussed your counterproposal, Vanessa began, her tone formal. We find the terms unacceptable. I nodded, unsurprised. I understand. $800 plus utilities would be more than our previous mortgage in Philadelphia, Andrew added. It makes no financial sense for us. That's a fair point, I acknowledged. I'm open to negotiating the amount, given that you're family. They exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. It's not just the amount, Vanessa continued. It's the principle. We moved here to establish our family home, not to become tenants in your house. I see, I said, feeling a strange calm despite the tension in the room. Then perhaps this living arrangement isn't the right fit for any of us. Andrew's expression tightened. Are you asking us to leave? When Vanessa is 6 months pregnant? I'm acknowledging reality, I replied. If you're unwilling to respect my ownership of this property, and I'm unwilling to surrender my rights to it, then continuing to live together seems unsustainable. So that's it? Vanessa's voice rose sharply. Your house matters more than your relationship with your son? With your grandchild? The emotional manipulation was transparent, but it still stung. No, Vanessa. My autonomy matters. My decades of sacrifice and hard work matter. And the respect I deserve as both a mother and a homeowner matters. This isn't about respect, Andrew argued. It's about practicality, about what makes sense for everyone's future. Whose future? I asked quietly. Mine or yours? The question hung in the air between us, unanswered because the answer was obvious to all of us. We'll need time to find another place, Andrew finally said, his voice tight with suppressed anger. Of course, I agreed. I'm not suggesting you leave immediately. Take the time you need to find something suitable. After they left, the house fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. A wedding gift from Richard's parents, one of the few original pieces of furniture Vanessa hadn't rearranged or replaced. The next few weeks passed in a state of Cold War. Andrew and Vanessa began house hunting openly, discussing properties within my hearing as if to emphasize their impending departure. They continued to help with my recovery needs, but perfunctorily, without the pretense of familial warmth that had previously cushioned our interactions. I focused on regaining my strength, graduating from walker to cane under the physical therapist's guidance. Each small victory, climbing 3 steps, walking to the bathroom unaided, standing long enough to brush my teeth at the sink, brought me closer to the independence I would need when they left. Because they would leave. That much was clear now. The only questions were when and what our relationship would look like afterward. One evening in late March, as spring rain tapped gently against my bedroom window, Andrew knocked on my door. His expression was different this time, less confrontational, more uncertain. "Can we talk?" he asked, hovering in the doorway. I nodded, gesturing to the chair beside me. "Of course." He sat, hands clasped between his knees. "Vanessa and I found a house, in Millfield, about 20 minutes from here." "That's good news," I said, genuinely pleased they'd found something nearby. "It's a new development, smaller than this place, but with all modern amenities. And importantly, something that's ours from the beginning." He hesitated. "We'll be moving next month." I nodded, absorbing this information. "I hope you'll be very happy there." Andrew looked at me then, really looked at me for what felt like the first time in months. "I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer." "All right. Do you think I'm a terrible person?" His voice cracked slightly on the question. "For what happened between us?" The vulnerability in his expression reminded me powerfully of the little boy who used to climb into my lap after scraping his knee, seeking both comfort and reassurance that he was still good, still loved despite his tears. "No, Andrew," I said, softly. "I don't think you're terrible. I think you're human. You wanted security for your family, and you saw a path to it through this house. But I hurt you in the process," he acknowledged. "I didn't see you as a whole person, with your own needs and rights. I saw you as an extension of myself, of what I needed." His insight surprised me. "Yes," I agreed simply. "That's what happened." He looked down at his hands. "I'm sorry, Mom. Truly. I got caught up in Vanessa's vision of our future, of what we deserved. I forgot about what you deserved." The apology felt genuine, a balm to wounds I hadn't fully acknowledged, even to myself. "Thank you for saying that." "I don't know what our relationship looks like going forward," he admitted. "But I'd like there to be one, for all of us, including your grandchild." "I'd like that too," I said, reaching out to touch his hand. "Very much." That night, lying in bed, I reflected on the strange journey of the past 6 months. What had begun as an apparent act of family unity, sharing a home across generations, had revealed fundamental truths about respect, boundaries, and the complicated nature of parent-child relationships in adulthood. I had lost something in this conflict, the unquestioning trust in my son's priorities, the comfortable assumption that his love for me would always translate into respect for my autonomy. But I had gained something too, a clearer understanding of my own worth, my right to protect what I had built, and the strength to stand firm even when doing so risked painful consequences. The following weeks brought a flurry of activity as Andrew and Vanessa prepared for their move. Boxes appeared. In hallways, furniture was disassembled, and discussions about what belonged to whom occasionally flared into brief tensions before resolving. Through it all, a fragile truce held between us, neither side wanting to reignite the larger conflict during this transition. As moving day approached, I found myself having mixed feelings. The return of my home to my sole control brought relief, but watching the nursery furniture being dismantled created a pang of sadness. My grandchild would not take their first steps on these floors, would not leave handprints on these walls. The family continuity I had quietly hoped for when they first moved in would not materialize, at least not in the way I had imagined. The evening before the move, Vanessa knocked on my bedroom door, a courtesy she had only recently begun observing. Again. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Please," I said, setting aside my book. She entered carefully, her pregnancy now in its final month making her movements deliberate. After lowering herself into the chair, she glanced around the room, taking in the familiar furnishings, the photos on the dresser, the worn quilt at the foot of the bed. "I owe you an apology," she began without preamble. "I came into your home with expectations and assumptions that were unfair." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I was raised to believe that family property should flow naturally to the next generation," she explained. "In my parents' world, the older generation steps aside gracefully to make room for young families. I never considered that your perspective might be different, or that your needs might be equally valid." Her self-awareness surprised me, as Andrew's had. "Thank you for recognizing that. I won't pretend I understand your attachment to this house," she continued. "To me, it's just an older structure with outdated features, but I can respect that it represents something important to you, your independence, your years of sacrifice." "It's both of those things," I agreed, "and also simply my home, filled with memories I cherish." Vanessa nodded, her hand absently, caressing her rounded belly. "I want you to know that despite our disagreements, you are welcome in our new home anytime. And we want our child to know their grandmother, to have a relationship with you." Relief washed through me at these words. Whatever else had been lost in this conflict, the connection to my grandchild remained possible. That means more to me than I can express. She smiled slightly, the first genuine smile she'd directed at me in months. "The nursery has a daybed that converts to a full guest bed. We thought, maybe sometimes you might like to stay over. When you're fully recovered, of course." "I'd like that very much," I said, my voice catching. The next day, as the moving truck pulled away from my curb, I stood on the porch watching it disappear around the corner. Andrew lingered a moment longer, our goodbye already exchanged but something still holding him there. "We'll see you Sunday for dinner?" he confirmed. "At the new place?" "I'll be there," I promised, with a proper housewarming gift. After he left, I walked slowly back into my house, undisputedly mine once more. The rooms echoed with a new emptiness, the spaces they had occupied now vacant, waiting to be reclaimed. In the kitchen, I put on the kettle for tea, then opened a drawer that had been inaccessible behind Vanessa's juicer for months. Inside were my mother's recipe cards, untouched since they'd moved in. I withdrew them carefully, the faded handwriting, bringing an immediate rush of memory and connection. Standing there, surrounded by the evidence of my life, the home I had maintained, the family recipes I cherished, the quiet routines I could now resume, I felt a profound sense of rightness settle over me. The past 6 months had been painful, revealing fault lines in relationships I had thought unshakable. But they had also confirmed something essential. My worth didn't depend on what I provided to others. My home, my boundaries, my needs were valid in their own right. As I sipped my tea at the kitchen table, sunlight streaming through windows that now held only my reflection, I began making plans. First, I would reclaim my bedroom, moving back into the space that had been mine for decades. Then, perhaps, I would finally undertake the bathroom renovation I'd been considering before Andrew and Vanessa arrived. And this summer, when my grandchild was born, I would begin the delicate process of building a new kind of relationship with my son and his. family, one based not on shared walls, but on mutual respect and clearer boundaries. The house felt different now, quieter, emptier, but also somehow more completely mine than it had been even before they moved in. Because now I had defended it, had articulated its value to me in ways I never needed to before. In standing firm about this physical space, I had also established the emotional and psychological space I deserved. My hip was healing, my home was mine again, and the future, while different from what I had once imagined, held its own promise of new beginnings and hard-won wisdom. Whatever came next, I would face it standing firmly on my own ground, in every sense of the phrase. 3 months had passed since Andrew and Vanessa moved into their new home in Millfield. Spring had blossomed into early summer, painting my garden, with colors I hadn't appreciated in years. Without the constant tension of sharing my space, I found myself rediscovering small pleasures. Morning coffee on the back porch, classical music playing throughout the house, rearranging furniture, according to my preferences alone. My recovery had progressed steadily. The physical therapist had discharged me 2 weeks ago, declaring my hip function remarkably improved for someone your age, a backhanded compliment I chose to take as a victory. The cane remained by my front door, occasionally necessary for longer walks but increasingly forgotten as I moved freely through my daily routines. I'd reclaimed every inch of my home, methodically erasing the traces of their brief residence. The burgundy dining room walls remained, though I'd added crisp white trim that refreshed the space without surrendering to Vanessa's gray obsession. My sewing room had been restored, the half-finished nursery decorations removed, leaving a clean slate for my long-postponed quilting projects. Only one room remained untouched, the bedroom that would have been my grandchild's nursery. The pale yellow paint Vanessa had chosen still brightened the walls, the ceiling stenciled with delicate "Clouds by Andrew one determined weekend." I couldn't bring myself to change it. Some small, superstitious part of me felt altering it might somehow jinx the tentative reconciliation we'd begun to build. Our relationship had entered a new phase, characterized by cautious respect on both sides. We spoke weekly by phone, their updates about the new house and impending birth carefully focused on practical matters rather than emotions. I'd visited their home twice, once for the promised housewarming dinner, and again to help Vanessa organize the baby's clothes, a task she approached with the same methodical precision she applied to everything. Today marked another milestone. They had invited me to attend the final ultrasound appointment, a gesture of inclusion that had brought tears to my eyes when Andrew called to extend the invitation. "We'd like you there," he'd said, his voice deliberately casual. "If you're feeling up to it." "I wouldn't miss it," I'd assured him, already mentally planning my outfit. Now, as I parked my car at the medical complex, I found myself battling unexpected nerves. This would be the longest period we'd spent together since the move, confined in the intimate space of a doctor's office. What unspoken tensions might surface? What careful distance might collapse? Vanessa spotted me first as I entered the waiting room, raising a hand in greeting. Her pregnancy had transformed her in the expected physical ways, the rounded belly, the slight swelling of her face, but also in less tangible ones. The sharp edges of her perfectionism seemed softened, her typical hypervigilance mellowed by the hormonal tide of late pregnancy. "You're right on time," she observed as I took the seat beside her. "Andrew just went to fill out some insurance forms. He'll be back in a minute." I nodded, searching for safe conversation. The traffic was lighter than I expected. "We've been here 30 minutes already," she said, shifting uncomfortably in the molded plastic chair. "These chairs are torture." "Devices when you're 8 months pregnant." I smiled sympathetically. "I remember those days. Nothing feels comfortable." A brief silence fell between us, not entirely awkward, but not quite natural either. Then Vanessa spoke, her voice quieter than usual. "I want to thank you for coming today. It means a lot to Andrew. And to you? I asked gently. She met my gaze directly. Yes, to me too. I know we've had our differences, but I've always respected how much you care about Andrew, about family. The acknowledgement, however limited, felt significant. Family is everything to me, I agreed, including the newest member, almost here. Andrew returned then, his face lighting with genuine pleasure at seeing me. Mom, glad you made it. Before more could be said, a nurse called Vanessa's name, and we all rose to follow her into the examination room. The space was tight for 3 adults, but the technician merely smiled and pulled up an extra stool for me. Grandma gets the special seat, she said with a wink, positioning me where I'd have a clear view of the monitor. As Vanessa settled on the examination table, Andrew beside her holding her hand, I felt a sudden wave of emotion. Despite everything, the conflicts, the painful revelations, the forced separation, here we were, united in anticipation of new life. Not as I had originally envisioned, perhaps, but present together nonetheless. The technician applied gel to Vanessa's rounded belly and began moving the wand across it, the monitor flickering with shadowy shapes. And then, unmistakably, there it was. A perfect profile, tiny nose and chin clearly defined, one hand raised, as if waving to its audience. Oh, I breathed, the sound escaping involuntarily. Strong heartbeat, the technician noted professionally. Good size for 34 weeks. Would you like to know the gender? I see you declined at previous appointments. Andrew and Vanessa exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Then Andrew looked at me. We thought maybe Grandma would like to be the first to know, he said softly. The gesture, unexpected, inclusive, symbolic, nearly undid me. I blinked rapidly against sudden tears. If you're sure, I managed. Vanessa nodded. We're sure. Well, Grandma, the technician said with a smile, you're looking at your granddaughter, a perfect little girl. A girl, my granddaughter. The knowledge settled into my heart, making the shadowy image on the screen suddenly, startlingly real. The rest of the appointment passed in a blur of medical terminology and scheduling details. As we walked toward the parking lot afterward, a new ease seemed to infuse our interaction, as if the shared experience had bypassed some of the lingering awkwardness between us. Would you like to come back to the house for lunch? Vanessa offered unexpectedly. Nothing fancy, but we could show you the nursery progress. I'd love that, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Following them to their new development, I marveled at how quickly circumstances could shift, how relationships could transform with the simple act of inclusion, of recognizing each other's place in a shared future. Their home was exactly as I remembered from my previous visits. Modern, minimalist, with the impersonal perfection of a new build. Yet they'd begun adding personal touches. Photographs on the mantle, including one of Andrew as a child with me and Richard. Houseplants softening the angular furniture. A handmade Afghan, not one of mine, but similar, draped across the sofa. The nursery is almost finished, Vanessa said, leading me down the hallway. Just waiting on the custom shelving Andrew ordered. The room they showed me was everything I'd expected from Vanessa. Coordinated, pristine, with a carefully curated aesthetic that prioritized style over sentiment. White walls, pale pink accents, furniture that looked straight from a designer catalog. Beautiful, certainly, but lacking the lived-in warmth I associated with nurseries. It's lovely, I said sincerely, running a hand over the crib rail. We were hoping, Andrew began, then hesitated, glancing at Vanessa, who nodded encouragement. We were hoping you might have some items from when I was a baby. Things with family, history, to balance all the new stuff. The request caught me off guard. During their time in my home, Vanessa had shown nothing but disdain for what she called my outdated taste. Yet here she was, actively seeking pieces of that history for her daughter. I kept everything, I admitted. It's all in the attic. Your baby blanket, some toys, the music box my mother gave you, even the rocking chair Richard used to rock you to sleep. That chair, Andrew said, his voice softening with memory. I remember you singing to me in that chair when I had chicken pox. I couldn't stop scratching, and you sang for hours until I finally fell asleep. I hadn't known he remembered that. The revelation that he carried such moments with him, treasured them enough to recall details decades later, filled me with a quiet joy. The chair needs refinishing, I warned. It's been in the attic for years. I could do that, Andrew offered, immediately. Refinish it, I mean, for her. For Grace, Vanessa clarified, one hand resting on her belly. We're naming her Grace Patricia. I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. Patricia? After her grandmother, Andrew confirmed, watching my face closely. If that's okay with you. It's more than okay, I whispered, composure finally deserting me completely. I don't have words. Well, that's a first, Andrew teased gently, breaking the emotional tension. Mom without words. We laughed together, and in that moment, something fundamental shifted in our relationship. Not a complete healing. There were still raw spots. Still moments where caution would be necessary, but a bridge across the chasm that had opened between us during those difficult months of cohabitation. Over lunch, conversation flowed more naturally than it had in nearly a year. We discussed the final preparations for the baby's arrival, Vanessa's maternity leave plans, Andrew's newly approved work-from-home arrangement for the first month after the birth. We'd like you to be there, Vanessa said suddenly, setting down her fork. The day we bring her home, to help us settle in. The invitation represented everything I'd hoped for but hadn't dared expect. Acknowledgement of my role, recognition of my value beyond material contributions, inclusion in the most intimate moments of their new family's formation. I'd be honored, I said simply. Driving home that afternoon, I found myself reflecting on the strange, painful journey that had brought us to this point. The conflict over my house, a battle that had seemed apocalyptic in the moment, had ultimately cleared. Ground for a healthier relationship. By establishing boundaries, by refusing to be diminished or displaced, I had paradoxically created space for genuine connection, rather than the forced proximity that had bred resentment. The following weekend, Andrew came alone to collect the baby items from my attic. We spent hours sorting through boxes, each item unearthing memories I thought long buried. I can't believe you kept all this, he marveled, holding a tiny blue sweater I had knitted during my pregnancy. Some of it's practically antique. That's the point of keepsakes, I reminded him. They connect generations. As we worked, conversation meandered through safer territory than we'd navigated in months. His job prospects, my garden plans, neighborhood changes. Then, as we were carefully wrapping the music box in acid-free tissue, Andrew cleared his throat. Mom, there's something I need to ask you. I looked up, alert to the serious shift in his tone. What is it? When I was going through Dad's old files, I found some adoption papers. He paused, watching my reaction carefully. Were you going to tell me? The question I had dreaded for decades hung in the air between us. I set down the music box, buying time to gather my thoughts. Yes, I said finally. Eventually, when it seemed necessary. Necessary, he repeated, a hint of the old bitterness creeping into his voice. Don't you think knowing where I came from might have been necessary to me? I chose my words with care. You came from us, Andrew. From the family that chose you, wanted you, raised you. The paperwork was just formality. But there's a whole medical history I don't know, he persisted. Genetic predispositions that might affect Grace. The practical concern was valid, but I sensed deeper questions beneath it, about identity, about belonging, about whether this new information recontextualized the recent conflict between us. The adoption was closed, I explained. Very little medical information was provided. But what we have is in those files you found. I never hid them. They were always there if you went looking. Why didn't you tell me sooner? The hurt in his voice was palpable. I sighed, settling back against an old trunk. At first, you were too young to understand. Then, after your father died, I worried it might feel like another loss, learning you weren't biologically connected to him. Later, it never seemed like the right moment. You were building your own identity, your own life. I didn't want to disrupt that. And during the past year, when we were living together, when everything fell apart between us? The unspoken question was clear. Would things have been different if I had shared this truth during our conflict? That would have been the worst possible time, I said firmly. It would have felt like emotional manipulation, using your adoption as a weapon to guilt you about your behavior toward me. I couldn't do that to you, no matter how hurt I was. He absorbed this, nodding slowly. I think I understand. You were protecting me. Again. Always, I confirmed. But perhaps sometimes protecting you meant protecting you from truths I wasn't sure you needed. Andrew picked up the music box again, running his fingers over its carved lid. Did they not want me, my birth parents? The vulnerability in the question broke my heart. They weren't in a position to care for any child, I said gently. Your birth mother was very young, facing difficult circumstances. She made the most loving choice available to her, finding a family who desperately wanted a child. You and Dad. Us, I agreed. From the moment we saw you, there was no question. You were ours. He was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, does this change anything? Between us, I mean. Not for me, I said firmly. You've been my son from the day we brought you home. Nothing could alter that. Not adoption papers, not conflicts over houses, nothing. I've been thinking about what happened, he admitted. About how quickly I prioritized what Vanessa and I wanted over what you needed. I'm not proud of it. We all make mistakes when family dynamics shift, I said, allowing myself the grace of acknowledging my own role in the conflict. I could have been clearer about boundaries from the beginning instead of hoping things would naturally work out. Still, he insisted, I should have recognized what the house meant to you, all those years of maintaining it alone, making it a home for us. I took that for granted. The acknowledgement felt like the closing of a circle, the final piece clicking into place in our slowly rebuilding relationship. Water under the bridge, I assured him, though we both knew it wasn't. Quite that simple. Some hurts leave marks, even after forgiveness. We finished packing the baby items in comfortable silence, each lost in our own thoughts. As Andrew loaded the last box into his car, he turned to me with newfound determination in his expression. I want to do better, he said simply. As a son, as a father. I want Grace to grow up understanding sacrifice and gratitude, not entitlement. You will, I assured him, recognizing the genuine resolve behind his words. We learn, we grow, we try again. That's family. After he left, I walked through my quiet house, touching familiar surfaces, appreciating anew the sanctuary I had fought to maintain. The home felt different now, not empty as it had immediately after their departure, but peaceful. A place that was entirely mine, yet still connected to the expanding family circle beyond its walls. In the spare room, the one that would have been Grace's nursery, I opened the window to let in the summer breeze, then stood surveying the blank canvas before me. Perhaps, I thought, it was time to reimagine this space. Not as a full-time nursery, but as a welcoming place for visits from my granddaughter, a room that honored both my independence and my connection to the next generation. 2 weeks later, My phone rang at 2:17 a.m., jolting me from deep sleep. Andrew's voice, breathless with excitement and anxiety, tumbled through the line. "Mom, it's time. We're heading to the hospital now. Van's contractions are 5 minutes apart." I was already reaching for the clothes I'd laid out in anticipation of this call. "I'll meet you there. Drive carefully." The maternity ward waiting room became my home for the next 14 hours, a limbo of sterilized surfaces and hushed conversations with other expectant family members. Nurses brought periodic updates, 5 centimeters, 6, 7, each report ratcheting up my anticipation and concern in equal measure. Finally, as evening approached again, Andrew appeared in the doorway, his face transformed by wonder and exhaustion. "She's here," he announced, voice breaking. 7 pounds, 3 ounces, perfect in every way. The flood of emotion, relief, joy, love for this child I hadn't yet met, nearly overwhelmed me. "And Vanessa?" "Exhausted but fine. Asking for you, actually." The invitation to enter that most intimate space, to be among the first to welcome this new life, felt like a profound gift after everything we'd navigated. Vanessa, propped against hospital pillows with an impossibly small bundle in her arms, looked up as I entered. The defensiveness that had characterized so many of our interactions had vanished, replaced by the vulnerable openness of new motherhood. "Patricia," she said softly, "meet your granddaughter." As I took that warm weight into my arms for the raw first time, looking down at features that somehow combined Andrew's newborn face with echoes of Vanessa, all the pain and conflict of the past year receded. This child represented something new, not an erasing of difficult history, but a path forward, a reason to build bridges rather than walls. "Hello, Grace," I whispered, tracing one perfect tiny ear with my finger. "I'm your grandma." In that moment, holding the next generation, I understood with perfect clarity what truly mattered. Not houses or possessions or control, but connection. I had fought for my home, for my autonomy, and won. But the greater victory was this: the chance to be present, to be respected, to be an integral part of my granddaughter's life without sacrificing my own. The days and weeks that followed brought a new rhythm to my life. Andrew and Vanessa, navigating the sleepless chaos of new parenthood, welcomed my experienced help without the underlying tension that had poisoned our earlier living arrangement. I visited regularly but briefly, respecting their need to establish their own family patterns while offering support that acknowledged my expertise without overwhelming their authority as parents. 3 months after Grace's birth, as summer faded into early autumn, they invited me for Sunday dinner, now a standing tradition, though usually held at their house. This time, Andrew suggested my place instead. "It's closer to the park," he explained. "We thought we might take Grace for her first official walk there afterward, if the weather holds." I agreed immediately, pleased by the opportunity to host them in my reclaimed space. The visit would be different this time, they as guests rather than residents, the power dynamic fundamentally altered by our shared experiences and hard-won mutual respect. As I prepared for their arrival, setting the table with my mother's china, arranging fresh flowers from my garden as a centerpiece, I caught my reflection in the dining room mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed different from the one who had agreed to let her son and daughter-in-law move in a year ago. More defined somehow, more comfortable in her own authority. The doorbell rang, and I moved to answer it with unhurried confidence. This was my home, my family, my life. Not perfect, not unmarked by conflict, but authentically mine. And I had earned the right to stand firmly in that truth, without apology or diminishment. "Welcome," I said, opening the door to greet them, Grace cradled in Andrew's arms. "Come in. Dinner's almost ready." As they crossed the threshold, entering. Now as visitors rather than occupants, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. The boundaries I had fought to establish had not created permanent division as I had feared, but rather the necessary foundation for genuine relationship, one built on respect rather than obligation, on choice rather than coercion. My home remained my sanctuary, the physical embodiment of decades of sacrifice and determination. My family remained my heart's greatest treasure, now expanded to include a granddaughter who would grow up knowing both her worth and mine. And I remained Patricia Miller, mother, grandmother, homeowner, survivor, standing firmly in the life I had built, the ground I had defended, the future I continued to shape with each choice and boundary. Grace stirred in Andrew's arms, her eyes finding mine with that uncanny focus newborns sometimes display. I reached out, stroking her downy head. This child named partly for me, yet entirely her own person from the beginning. "Welcome to Grandma's house," I whispered. "A place you'll always be loved, always be welcome, but never entitled to own." Andrew caught my words and nodded, the understanding between us deeper now for having been tested, broken, and carefully reconstructed. "That's exactly right," he agreed, passing his daughter gently into my waiting arms. "Some lessons are worth learning the hard way." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.